Ariana Miles had counted exactly $11.37 3 times that morning, the last time with trembling fingers, praying the math would magically change. It didn't, but she still walked into the Crane family bakery with her head high, because today was the day before Lila turned 7, and even a mother with empty pockets refuses to fail the child who looks at her like she holds the whole world. The bell above the door chimed like an announcement of who didn't belong there. Designer purses, pearl earrings, manicured hands. Every head turned just long enough to register. Ariana's faded scrubs, tired shoes, and the little girl with bright braids clinging to her side. Ariana ignored the stares. She had learned long ago that staring wasn't the worst cruelty the world offered. The smell inside was so heavenly it hurt. Warm cinnamon, cooling chocolate, fresh bread so soft it seemed to glow behind the glass. And there it was, the pink princess cake. Lila had fallen in love with during those cold early morning walks when Ariana passed the bakery on her way to her shift. Lila's entire face lit up like sunrise. "Mommy, look. It's so sparkly." Ariana felt her heart twist. $42. A mountain compared to the crumpled bills hidden in her pocket. She squeezed Lila's hand and whispered, "Let Mommy look around first," but even hope felt heavy. When Ariana reached the counter, Henrietta Crane, silver hair pinned neatly, pearls strung tight around her neck, looked up with a polite bakery smile that died the moment she saw who was standing there. Her eyes flattened. Her posture stiffened. Then came the pause, the kind Ariana knew too well. A pause that said you don't belong here without saying a word. Ariana swallowed her pride and asked softly, "Excuse me, do you have any expired cakes? Maybe something you're about to throw out? I can pay a little." Henrietta's lips thinned. "We don't sell garbage," she said, loud enough for the customers behind Ariana to hear. Someone snickered. Someone whispered. Ariana felt Lila shift closer to her side, small fingers tightening around her hand. Then Bryce Crane pushed through the swinging kitchen door, flour dusting his apron and arrogance stamped across his face. He towered over Ariana, eyes sweeping her clothes, her daughter, her worn-out life. "If you can't afford the cakes here," he announced loudly. The dollar store's down the street. "Might be more your speed." A few customers looked away in discomfort, but no one spoke. Not one. Lila tugged Ariana's sleeve, whispering, "Mommy, can I have the pink one, please?" Her voice was so full of innocent hope it felt like a bruise blooming across Ariana's chest. Bryce turned toward that same pink cake with a look that made Ariana's stomach drop. He reached into the display case, lifted the cake carefully, so gently that for one impossible second, Ariana thought maybe he was handing it to Lila. Then he turned, walked straight to the trash can, and with cold deliberation slammed the cake inside. The soft thud of frosting hitting plastic felt like a slap across the room. Sugar roses smashed. The tiny princess toppled. Pink icing smeared into garbage. Lila's breath hitched, her face crumpling before the sobs burst out, messy and heartbreakingly loud. "Why did he throw it away, Mommy? What did I do wrong?" Bryce wiped his hands as if discarding a nuisance. Problem solved. Ariana held her crying daughter and walked out without saying a word, because sometimes silence is the only armor a person has left. She sat on the weathered bench outside, trying to mend her child's shattered joy, while her own humiliation clawed at her ribs. People passed, people stared, people pretended not to. And then, like he had simply stepped out of the quiet itself, the old man from the back of the line appeared. He was easy to overlook in his frayed flannel shirt, dusty work boots, and hands that looked built for fixing fences, not expensive pastries. But Ariana had noticed none of that earlier. What she saw now was something else entirely. Calm eyes, steady presence, and a stillness that felt like safety. Samuel Whitaker didn't step too close, didn't ask intrusive questions. He simply gestured to the far end of the bench and asked in a gentle, gravelly voice, "Mind if I sit?" When Lila peeked at him through wet lashes, he smiled at her as though she mattered, as though she hadn't just been treated like trash. I heard tomorrow's your birthday, he said softly. How old are you gonna be, sweetheart? 7, she whispered. 7? He nodded like it was the most important news he'd heard in years. Well, 7-year-olds deserve the best birthday cakes in the world, and that sad little thing in there, not good enough for a girl like you? Lila blinked through her tears. A tiny smile started. Ariana felt her breath catch, not because she trusted him, but because Lila did. And trust, coming from a wounded child, is a magic the world rarely earns. Samuel reached into his pocket, pulled out a simple white card, and extended it. Call this number tomorrow morning, 8 sharp. Tell them Samuel sent you. Lila will have her cake. Ariana stared at the card. Why would you help us? You don't even know us. Samuel stood, adjusting the cuff of his worn sleeve. Because what happened in there was wrong, he said quietly. And no mother should carry that alone. Not in my town. Then he walked away slowly, like a man with no desire for recognition, leaving behind only a faint smell of diner coffee. And a glimmer of hope Ariana hadn't felt in years. Ariana woke before the sun, the apartment still dark and quiet except for Lila's soft breathing from the bedroom. She sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at the plain white card Samuel had given her, the blue-inked number looking almost unreal under the weak light. She picked it up, put it down, picked it up again. Her stomach twisted with fear. What if this was a joke? What if she called and someone laughed? She remembered Lila's small, broken voice asking what she had done wrong, and that alone pushed Ariana's shaking hand to the phone. At exactly 7:59 a.m., she dialed. After 2 rings, a calm, polished voice answered, Whitaker Family Office. How may I assist you? Ariana froze. Whitaker, a name she'd seen on the city library, on the hospital wing, on plaques around town. She whispered that Samuel had told her to call. The woman on the line softened immediately. Yes, Ms. Miles. We've been expecting your call. Expecting her. Ariana barely managed to give her address before the call ended. She stood in the kitchen, heart pounding, unsure whether to cry or run. 2 hours later, a sleek black SUV glided into her worn-down neighborhood like a visitor from another world. Doors cracked open around the complex. Curtains twitched. And then a sharply dressed driver stepped out carrying a clipboard and boxes wrapped in gold ribbon. Gift after gift filled Ariana's doorway. Books, clothes, art supplies, a princess dress, and finally a pink bicycle with little golden stars on the wheels. Lila came running, her unicorn pajamas swishing as she gasped at the mountain of surprises. Then came the cake. 3 tiers high, covered in shimmering pink frosting with edible roses, and topped with a crystal princess that sparkled like real glass. Lila squealed with pure joy, jumping barefoot on the cold floor. Mommy! Mommy, it's for me! Ariana pressed a hand to her mouth, speechless. The driver handed Ariana a final envelope, bowed politely, and returned to the SUV. Inside the envelope, a handwritten letter from Samuel Whitaker. He wrote about his late wife Marjorie, who had been a nurse like Ariana, about how she believed dignity wasn't earned, it was owed. No mother should experience what you experienced, the letter said. Consider this a small reflection of the kindness she lived her life giving. Ariana's tears fell onto the ink before she could stop them. Across town, Samuel sat alone in his farmhouse, the land quiet except for the wind against the windows. On his desk lay the complaint reports he had requested, 3 in the last 18 months, all from black customers, all describing moments of humiliation or disrespect at the hands of Bryce Crane. All marked as resolved, though clearly nothing had ever been done. Samuel's weathered hands shook slightly as he traced the words. Cruelty repeated, cruelty ignored, cruelty tolerated. He looked at the framed photograph of his late wife, Marjorie, whose warm smile lit up the room even from behind glass. I couldn't stop the world from hurting you, he whispered, voice roughened by emotion. But I can stop them from hurting others. He called the Crane family that evening. Henrietta answered with her usual crisp tone, unaware that her world was about to shift. Samuel requested a meeting at the downtown property office Monday morning. He didn't mention his name. He didn't mention why. Monday morning arrived bitter and gray. Henrietta and Bryce entered the conference room in their best clothes. Henrietta in a navy suit, Bryce freshly shaved, hair slicked back. They believed they were there for routine lease paperwork. They sat waiting for Mr. Whitaker, exchanging impatient glances as the minutes passed. Bryce scowled. "Unprofessional," he muttered. "Man owns half this town and can't show up on time?" Henrietta clicked her tongue in agreement. Then the door opened. Samuel Whitaker stepped in wearing the same flannel shirt and work boots he had worn inside their bakery. Henrietta blinked. Bryce straightened, confused. "Excuse me," Henrietta began, stiff and formal. "We're waiting for Mr. Whitaker." Samuel took a seat at the head of the table, opened a folder, and said calmly, "I am Mr. Whitaker." The color drained from Henrietta's face. Bryce's jaw fell slack. And then Samuel began to speak, recounting word for word the cruelty he had seen inside their bakery, the humiliation, the insults, the arrogance. He placed the complaint files on the table with a quiet finality that echoed louder than shouting. "You threw away a child's birthday cake to make a point," Samuel said, his voice low but edged with steel. "Today, I'm making mine." Henrietta stammered, begging for a chance to explain, but Samuel raised a hand and she fell silent. "Your lease expires in 45 days, he continued. "Whether you stay or whether you go depends on what you do next." He slid a single-page document across the table. Bryce grabbed it with shaking hands. His face went pale as he read the first requirement aloud. "We must apologize to Ms. Ariana Miles and her daughter, in person, together, and sincerely." The room went silent except for the faint hum of the overhead lights. Henrietta's eyes filled with tears as reality began to settle heavily onto her shoulders. Bryce felt something inside him crack, something long hardened by entitlement and unchecked privilege. And in that quiet, shattering moment, both Cranes understood exactly who they had been and exactly what they had become. The Crane family car rolled slowly into Ariana's apartment complex, its polished exterior painfully out of place among rusted stair rails and cracked sidewalks. Henrietta sat rigid in the passenger seat, clutching her purse like a shield, her eyes darting nervously at the surroundings she had spent a lifetime pretending didn't exist. Bryce walked slightly ahead of her when they climbed the stairs, but even his confident stride had cracked. Every step seemed to press the weight of what he had done more deeply into his chest. When they reached apartment 4B, Henrietta raised a trembling fist to knock, then froze, unable to bring herself to touch the door she had once believed was beneath her. Bryce knocked instead, 3 sharp taps that echoed down the narrow hallway like a summons neither of them felt prepared for. After a moment, they heard the locks turning, one after another, and then Ariana appeared in the doorway, framed by the dim light of her modest living room. She wore simple clothes, but there was a strength in her posture that made both Cranes look down in shame. Lila stood beside her mother, half hidden behind Ariana's leg, her small hand wrapped tightly around her mother's finger. Ariana said nothing. Her silence wasn't cold. It was powerful, steady, the kind that forced truth to rise. Henrietta stepped forward first, her voice shaking as though her own words might break her. She apologized, haltingly at first, then fully, admitting her cruelty, admitting her arrogance, admitting that no excuse could undo the harm she had caused. Tears slipped down her cheeks as she spoke. The flawless mask she had always worn cracked beyond repair. Ariana didn't rush to comfort her, didn't offer easy forgiveness. She simply listened, her expression calm but unreadable. Then Bryce actually knelt, on the scuffed floor in front of Lila. His voice wavered as he told her he'd thrown away her cake, not because she'd done anything wrong, but because he'd wanted to make her mother feel small. He said he was ashamed, that he wished he could take it back, that he hoped someday she could look at him without fear. Lila watched him quietly, her young face unusually serious, and then she did something that made all three adults fall silent. She reached out and touched Bryce's hand with her tiny fingers. "Mr. Samuel said you would come," she whispered. Bryce bowed his head and cried. Ariana finally opened the door wider, letting them step inside, not as forgiven people, but as people willing to face what they had done. They sat together in her small living room, surrounded by the bright remnants of Lila's birthday. The pink bicycle gleamed beside the wall. The princess dress hung over a chair. The massive cake stand sat empty on the counter. As the Cranes took in the simplicity and love that filled this small home, their shame grew heavier, but something else began to grow alongside it. A sincerity neither had known they were capable of. They didn't leave with Ariana's forgiveness that day. Forgiveness is not a door someone else can demand, but they left having finally taken responsibility, and sometimes that is the first step to becoming someone entirely different. A week later, Ariana found herself sitting in Samuel Whitaker's office, the morning light filtering through tall windows and settling softly across his desk. She still didn't fully understand why she had been invited, and she said so as she sat nervously in the chair across from him. Samuel smiled gently, his tired eyes warm with a kindness that ran deeper than his wealth. He told her he had created something new, an initiative in honor of his late wife, Marjorie. A project dedicated to making sure no child in town ever went without a birthday cake, without a moment of joy, without dignity. He called it Marjorie's Birthday Promise. Then he asked Ariana to run it. She blinked in shock, staring at him, unable to speak. Samuel explained what he saw in her: strength, compassion, resilience, a quiet dignity that had survived cruelty after cruelty. "My wife believed that people like you are the backbone of this world," he said softly. "I want you to be the heart of this project. Good pay, benefits for you and Lila. You'll choose the families. You'll decide who needs help. You'll make sure no child ever hears the words your daughter heard." For the first time in a long time, Ariana felt something powerful rise inside her. Pride, purpose, the realization that her story was no longer one of survival, but transformation. When she accepted the job, Samuel exhaled like a man letting go of a heavy stone he'd carried for years. Word about the project spread quickly across town, not as gossip, but as a quiet miracle. Within weeks, Ariana and Lila were visiting families who had been overlooked and forgotten, delivering cakes, planning small parties, bringing laughter into homes that had long forgotten what joy could sound like. Lila took to the work instantly, wearing her favorite princess dress as she handed cupcakes to children who had never held one before. And every time she did, she repeated the same phrase with a smile brighter than the candles on any cake: "Everyone deserves a happy birthday." The Crane family bakery, meanwhile, began to change. The apology had not erased their past, but Samuel's terms forced truth into the open. Customers returned cautiously. Henrietta hired new staff, kind staff, and replaced her pearls with humility. Bryce spent hours each day giving away leftover pastries to shelters, schools, and families in need, insisting it wasn't charity, but responsibility. For the first time, their bakery began to feel like it belonged to the whole community, not just the wealthy few. And though it would take time, months, even years, the Cranes began earning the trust they had once thrown away so casually. One crisp autumn morning, as Ariana and Lila walked past the bakery on their way to the bus stop, they saw Bryce through the window, carefully placing a pink cake onto the display stand. The moment he spotted them, he stepped outside. No pride, no arrogance, just a quiet respect. He offered Lila a small cupcake, pink with a tiny sugar princess on top, and asked softly, "May I give this to you?" Lila accepted it with a shy smile. Ariana nodded once, a silent acknowledgement of a path slowly being rebuilt, not for the Cranes, but for the town itself. And watching from the distance across the street, leaning on his old truck with the same calm smile he always carried, was Samuel Whitaker, a man who had turned a moment of cruelty into a legacy of kindness that would outlive them all.